This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order this this special town council meeting for Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. Special meeting on the budget. Before we go into the agenda, I'm just going to read an announcement for the benefit of those who haven't participated with us through the virtual meeting system yet. Members of the public, please keep your microphones muted during the meeting unless you are the person asking a question. Also, keep your camera inactive unless you're speaking. Thank you. This system does not deal well with multiple simultaneous speakers. The audio from only one person will come through at a time. Therefore, please only speak if you have been recognized. I do not have a wooden gavel with me at my workstation here because I don't need one. As the meeting organizer, I have a mute all button. If people aren't participating respectfully, I'll be forced to mute all so the person who has the floor can be heard. Once the meeting starts, we'll go through the departments in the order they are on the agenda. If you wish to question or comment regarding a particular department, please type into the chat bar that you do. If you look in one of the top corners of your screen, you'll see a little cartoon text bubble. When you click on that icon, you'll see a strip appear on the side of your screen. Please type into that strip your request to speak. I will first look for questions from those who are using a computer or the smartphone app to participate. Once I've heard from all who are logged in digitally, I'll seek comments from those who have called in. Right now, we have 2 telephone callers. If you do intend to comment, you must introduce yourself. You must state your name and address. Okay. On to the agenda. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you. Fishbein?
Here.
Laffin?
Here.
Marone?
Here.
Morgenstein?
Here.
Thank you. Shortell?
Here.
Tata?
Here.
Testa?
Here.
Dandry?
Here.
Chairman Savoni?
Here.
Mayor Dickinson?
Here.
And Jim Bowes?
Present.
Thank you.
All right. The first item on the agenda is the library. And I do see Jane Fisher logged into the call. And now I see her on screen.
Yes, hello.
Welcome. Would you like to begin with some introductory comments or remarks?
Yes, thank you. I've prepared some remarks anticipating that you might have some questions. So if it's okay with you, I'll read through the remark. And then if I didn't get to all your questions, happy to answer anything else. Should take 15 or 20 minutes. No, just kidding.
If you could just give me a minute, I just want to clean up the audio.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the library proposed a 2% increase in the allocation from the town, myself in the center there. And we understand why that has not been approved in the mayor's budget. Given the current state of the economy, we're also anticipating that all of our other sources of income, including fines, donations, memberships, sales of used books, and interest income from CDs, will be reduced. Our budget committee is continuing to revise its budget for the next fiscal year. Right now, we're anticipating about $70,000 less operating income than we have budgeted in the current fiscal year. The library also generates income from its endowment investments. Our policy calls for a distribution of 3 to 6% of those proceeds averaged over the last 3 years from our investments, and that money directly supports our annual operating expenses. The budget that you received and may have reviewed included a 5.5 distribution from those endowment funds for the next fiscal year. Recognizing that this is an extraordinary time, the library's budget committee recommends that we increase that to a 6% distribution in the next fiscal year. So I want to tell you about our plans for managing the reduction in income, along with the reality of fixed or increasing expenses that will still face us. Our plans include reducing staff levels, reducing wage increases, and reducing the budget for public programs. Specifically, we've always used non-town funds, most recently funds from the bookseller, our used bookstore, to operate the library on Sundays in the winter months. Unfortunately, our bookstore may not be able to safely open while social distancing is needed. And we don't expect as many customers even if we were to open. So it's likely that this lost revenue will result in a decision not to open on Sundays this winter. That's something we'll evaluate in the fall. More than 20 of our part-time staff members, primarily staff in our circulation department, have been separated. While we hope to have them return to work when we become a full-service library again in the future, we're not sure when that will be, so we made the very painful decision to remove them from the payroll. And I know that people across our community are reeling from the pain of COVID-19, but saying goodbye to these staff members, most of whom are Wallingford residents who've served our town with such dedication, was very heartbreaking. The part-time staff members who do remain on our payroll will not receive a wage increase this year. Wage increases for our full-time staff members will be less than originally planned. The timing, while no one's fault, is difficult because we are simultaneously shifting to a high deductible health plan with higher premiums for our staff to shoulder. We also don't anticipate opening the Yalesville branch in the foreseeable future. That decision is based on both budgetary constraints and safety concerns. Like the used bookstore, the bookseller, the Yalesville branch is very small and social distancing will be nearly impossible if 2 or 3 people enter. Use of the Yalesville Library has been on the decline in recent years. The board and I plan to take a hard look at whether it makes sense for our community to continue to have a branch library that serves a small segment of our population. Personally, I have grand ideas that we could serve more people with a mobile information services book delivery vehicle, but that's a conversation for another time. We're also proposing a reduction in our budget for public programs. While our programs have been wildly successful with patrons setting their alarms for 7 a.m. on the day registration begins for our most popular programs, we won't be able to offer on-site programs until it's safe to do so. Our staff has really done an extraordinary job offering virtual programs in recent weeks, and there will continue to be some expense for those programs, but certain program costs and likely the overall number of programs will be reduced because of the pandemic. Having said that, we also know that the needs of our community have likely changed very suddenly, and we anticipate some shifts in our programs and services as we assist people with job seeking and other information needs related to their economic well-being. There are a couple of places where we expect to increase our spending. These include spending for safety, sanitizing, PPP-related expenses. Also, we anticipate the need for more spending on digital materials, ebooks, e-audiobooks, streaming films. Among the nearly 30 libraries in our consortium, Wallingford library users are the biggest consumer of digital materials by far, and our shared collection is not adequate, especially now. But fear not, we also will continue to purchase print materials, and we look forward to getting print materials back into the hands of Wallingford residents again soon. So finally, I want to mention that at the end of February, our library adopted a new 3-year strategic plan. Modesty aside, we did an excellent job getting input from residents and community leaders regarding their aspirations for the community. And we use that information to create a plan for how the library can help people achieve their aspirations, thereby strengthening our community. We know that the needs of the residents have likely changed in recent weeks, especially. So we're committed now to reaching out to residents to determine what people need in the era of pandemic / post-pandemic that will have long-lasting effects, no doubt. So we'll strive, as we always do, to help our community and its residents thrive. Those are my prepared remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. It certainly was a thoughtful introduction to the current situation in the library. And you've clearly taken some active steps to deal with the present situation. Are there questions from counselors? I don't see anything in the chat bar. All right, first up is Counselor Tada.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
First of all, thank you for your budget. I found it really helpful, and all the charts and graphs and everything was very helpful to me. So thank you for that. And I think you already answered this question, but so you said you're revising the budget due to all of these unfortunate changes, and I'm so sorry to hear you had to lay people off and
Yeah, very hard.
close down because of this. It's terrible. But when you said that there's a revised budget, do you have a revised final number yet? Is that something that we'll be getting?
So typically the mayor and the council approve a lump sum budget allocation from the town for the library. Right now, what the budget we're working with is that is held flat because that's what's in the mayor's budget. Our board is working on revising a budget with that number.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Any other questions from members of the council? And any questions for the library from members of the public? You could please enter that in the chat bar. That'd be helpful. And any questions for the library from those who have dialed in on the telephone? All right. Looks like you got off easy. And while you're welcome to stay on the call, we're all set with you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
bye-bye.
All right, next up is the Board of Education, Dr. Menzo.
Okay, I'm going to take control of the screen to share with you a presentation.
Thank you.
Right. So do you all have that on your screen? Okay. So as was just mentioned, first of all, before I get started, Dr. Menzo, Superintendent Wallingford Public Schools, in the same room but socially distanced about 10 feet to 12 feet from me is my business manager, Dominic Barone, and also our food services director, Mr. Bondi, and online is also our maintenance director, Mr. Deptula. We also have online also our board chair, Ms. Karen Levac. The budget, as we all know, is a very different budget this year because of the COVID events that have occurred. So what I provided tonight is just an overview of where we are based on the board recommendation and the mayor's funding, or recommended budget, shall I say. So this document is an updated analysis. Within the document, we've answered the public's questions, but this will be available hopefully to the public if they would like this document. We'll post it on our website. We also made it available to the council. But within the document, we tried to answer the questions so that it flowed more appropriately, so we weren't stopping and starting. We did include enrollment information, which can be found on in the last section of resources. And we also included special education information. Again, that'll be in the last section of resources. One of the key pieces is that when the Board of Education submits its number, the mayor then recommends a budget. And the reductions are not based in areas that they will end up being reduced in, so to speak. So the mayor makes recommendations. He reduces allocations to certain accounts, but then the board has the final line item control. This was a question of one of our citizens who asked why certain lines were cut or reduced by the mayor. In reality, the board will shore up those accounts or true up those accounts once we have a final appropriation to the Board of Education.
Dr. Menzo, if you wouldn't
Yes.
mind, just so we're checking off whose questions have been answered, could you let us know whose question
This
that
was Mrs. Kofer.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So that really, Mrs. Kofer had several questions about certain accounts. Those accounts weren't reduced by the board. And in some instances, those accounts had more funding allocated to them by the mayor when he sets the document. So those, again, will all be trued up once where the final allocation is provided. So kind of to start off with everybody, just to share, when we look at oops, sorry, I apologize. This page shows the initial request of the Board of Education, and it also then shows the funding for the strategic plan and the total request. On the bottom of this are the reoccurring strategic plan items, and I want to make a point of saying reoccurring because the fact is that there are items obviously in our strategic plan that are one-time expenditures, and those often are the ones that we look to utilize unencumbered funds at the end of the year, or the 1% account. These were the capital items that were requested by the Board of Education this year. Again, the mayor has allocated in his budget request to the town to have these allocations provided to the Board of Education. So when we ended up in February, the increase to the budget that the board recommended was a 3.57. The mayor came back with his budget, which started with a difference of $1,268,638. That's the difference between the board request and the mayor's appropriation or recommended budget. We removed the reoccurring strategic plan items. Those were predominantly staff items. So that reduced our deficit, or our gap, funding gaps, so to speak, to $737,683. So we wanted to share with you how we are planning to close that gap, because that's the big question in light of the new landscape on which we're situated with the COVID crisis as well. The big drivers that we always review are obviously our utilities and operational expenses. These accounts are set, or these increases are set by the mayor and provided to us by the different departments. So we utilize those pieces of data to formulate our budget at that time. We did include on this document the town council back before the budget process started asked us to remove or share with you if we were to take certain maintenance expenses out of our budget that could be transferred to the town, what would those be? So this document here shows the response to that question. It would be approximately $1,879,720. That includes repair and maintenance items at 1.3 million, supplies and other. These aren't services, these are other supplies or other resources necessary for the schools in terms of maintenance. Transportation is a huge part of our budget. And this year we were up for a new contract. At present time, because we had a 0 last year, the new contract, the first year represents a 9% increase. The question that you see here, these following questions on transportation came from Mr. Bradinsky. And it basically, the first question is the mayor's proposed budget on page 65 includes $7,284,908 for pupil transportation. If you have more of a current estimate, what would that be, and explain. There are no changes to that estimate at this time. Next one is please break down how the budgeted amount for pupil transportation was calculated. As you can see, there's the general education home to school transportation that is calculated based on student population at individual schools entitled to transportation due to address and proximity to that school. The special education in-district transportation budget is calculated based on individual student needs as determined and documented in a student's individual educational plan. And the special education out of district is calculated based on individual student needs determined and documented also in the individual education plan. And those would be for schools obviously outside of the town of Wallingford. The companies, it was asked who held the contracts. Home to school. We have in-district and general home to school education transportation through Durham Services. We're in the process of finalizing our contract. They were the low bidder, and we are in the process of negotiating and finalizing that with the help of the attorney Small from the town hall. In district special education, we also use Durham Services as well as CTS and M&J. We have out of district services. We use Durham, we use CTS, M&J rather, Hunters, and then magnet schools are Durham School Services, and field trips are Durham School Services. Are the costs that are assigned to each based upon bids, contracts, or estimates? The costs are based on estimates attributed to students' needs and enrollment. Note, general education, home to school, and in-district transportation is usually based on contract and the cost multiplied by the number of required bus runs. However, due to not having the finalized contract for those services, the cost is based on the bid pricing. Again, in general terms, and these were all Mr. Brzezinski's questions, describe the contracts and or bids, vendor amounts. So what you'll see here is each vendor and the amount that was budgeted for next year. And that was the in-school transportation. This is the out-of-district transportation. So in-district, out-of-district, equaling the $7,271,280. Another question, if costs are contingent and or variable based upon factors such as routes, escalators, options, and add-ons, and the like, please in general terms describe those contingencies, variables, and please in general terms explain any assumptions with respect to unknowns that you used in determining the transportation cost that is in the budget. In-district costs are generally contingent on the number of routes. Out-of-district costs are contingent on many factors, including location of school, number of students, and special program or special requirements such as aids. Key unknowns are how many students are outplaced, where they are going, and additional accommodations required. assumptions were made based on historical data as well as the potential for additional outplacements. As many of you know, and those who follow our budget annually know that special education is oftentimes difficult to get a specific number at any point because there are changes throughout the course of a school year. And that's why in our monthly projections, oftentimes the special education and transportation numbers fluctuate based on students that might be either entering our district or leaving our district. Another set of questions from Mr. Budinsky. How much will be saved on pupil transportation because of the shutdown? How much savings is based upon stopping all payments to bus contractors? Has a contingency been factored into the budget? And the executive order seems to require negotiation of the amendments. Please describe any. The final savings in the transportation due to such shutdown is still to be determined because we are in ongoing negotiations at this time. The reported unencumbered fund balance reported on April 27th, 2020, last Monday, does not account for the potential cost attributed to payments to the bus company based on the governor's executive order. So that unencumbered fund balance was accurate as of that day without us paying anything to the bus company. We made that very clear last week. The 2020-21 budget does not have a contingency for payments to the bus company based on the executive order or the CARES Act. Any payment would come from the current year's unencumbered funds, which have not been fully expended as negotiations are ongoing with the company. So we didn't build anything into next year's budget. However, we have not allocated or recommended any further allocation of any unencumbered funds from this year's budget, the 1920, knowing that there's the potential that we will have to pay something to the bus company. So the negotiations are ongoing at this time. So at this time, we would not be speaking to, obviously, the terms of those negotiations or amendments. Will schools be out? I had to update this today. The governor announced today that we will not be open to school students for the remainder of the school year. So the school year will end June 16th. Distance learning will continue until then. But that was just announced today, as you most likely know already. The next piece was insurance details. This was another question of the town council. If we were to remove insurance from the budget, what would that look like? So this is our medical. As we all know, health insurance, there was a significant increase to the town. It was estimated at 25.3 in January. When we have first established our budget in December, it was 10. And then now we've settled in at 14.5. When we look at the budget each year, we look at our salaries. Teachers' wages plus step is a negotiated 2.99, building administrators 2.36, certified staff retirement savings. So this is when we have retirees. It's basically taking that retiree and filling their position, if necessary to fill it, with a person coming in at a lower rate. What is the actual savings attributed? Initially, we reduced 5.3 teachers, and that was when we initially presented the budget back in February. We'll explain how that's changed over the course of the last few weeks. So again, as I said, we initially reduced 5.3 teachers. You'll see where they were located. These are all attributed to reduction in enrollment or modification in programming, still meeting the needs of the students. As of Monday, we recommended to the board an additional 6.2 certified staff to be reduced based on enrollment shifts, and there was an added savings there. So the total certified staff in this budget is a reduction of 11.5 full-time equivalents. The non-certified side of our budget, we added 2 paraeducators, as you could see in the initial presentation, 1 each for special education, 1 at Highland in the preschool. and one at Moses Y Beach. There was a retirement savings for the non-certified. At that time, we reduced one full-time clerical, we reduced one part-time clerical, and we added 2 greeters for a net savings of $27,999. As of the COVID incident, as well as just reviewing our needs, we reduced an additional 8 part-time non-certified and 1 full-time non-certified staff member for a savings of $116,018. Total non-certified reductions, 2 full-time and 9 part-time at this time. Not everything throughout the COVID crisis could be reductions. There are some things that we had to add, and we anticipate adding due to the fact that we have additional services that will need to be provided to students. So we do have in the budget that we're accounting for is an additional 1 full-time equivalent speech language pathologist, 1 full-time equivalent assistive technology specialist, 10 full-time special education paraeducators. However, there is not a budgetary increase because we are looking to shift 10 general education paraeducators, utilize them differently. So we've been trying to be very strategic as we move forward because we know that we're trying to work to stay within what the mayor has provided us in these very fiscally challenging times for our community, state, and nation. The town council had asked us, where are there open positions right now? So as of Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, we have 1 reading interventionist who retired just this past week, which needs to be filled to offer reading support services at E.C. Stevens Elementary School. We have 2, and there are only 2 clerical positions, 2 clerical positions at Moses Y Beach Elementary School. There were staff members in those positions who shifted to other positions when they became open as advancement opportunities for them. We have 2 IT technicians, which you could imagine these 2 positions are being felt that they're open right now due to the fact that we have so much technology that's gone out to students. These are in dire need, but the challenge again is that hiring processes right now are difficult with the COVID restrictions. And then we have 2 custodians, we have a retirement, and we had a position that we were unable to fill. And again, that's been very challenging with the needs during the COVID scenario of cleaning and making sure that we're maintaining our buildings to a high level of safety and security. Another area that we see that we're going to have to look at additional expenses are in special education in general. There are tuitions and transportation that we're expecting will have to take on based on the distance learning, and we're estimating that at $220,000. In addition, these are added expenses to the budget due to special education needs, but what we're recommending is that these do not come from the allocated funds from the proposed budget the mayor gives us, but rather come from the 1% special education account. So these account for extended school year, outside evaluations, tutoring, related services, which are occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language therapy, and testing materials. If we used this money, this $339,600 would still leave $308,373 in that account. The reason why we're comfortable using that money from that special ed 1% account is that these are non-reoccurring. We do not anticipate these needs in the 21-22 school year. They would only be needed in the 2021 school year, so they would not become part of the base for next year's budget. So that's why we're comfortable utilizing the 1% account on one-time expenditures. So if we go back to slide 6, if you were following, there was $737,683 gap between the board's proposed budget and the mayor's allocation after we took out the reoccurring strategic plan items. So our recommendation to close the gap or begin to close the gap is to transfer $150,000 from grants and to reduce the tutoring account, a different tutoring account, by $75,000. So that now we get to the gap of $512,683. The reduction of certified staff and non-certified staff that we presented this evening is $678,116, which actually brings us to the good $165,433. However, we do need to add back these two special ed services, which then again brings us to the good to $5,571. But then we also need to account for the potential additional outplacements and transportation, which is $220,000, which leaves us at a gap at this point of $214,429. The other topic that we wanted to share with you is the unencumbered fund balance. It was $3,257,129. We committed purchases for curriculum, which are going to be definitely needed based on the COVID crisis, of $400,088. We committed non-reoccurring strategic plan items, which I've listed on the next page, of $586,300. Food services, because we're not serving lunch every day, we are serving now well over 1,000 meals, close to 2,000 breakfasts and lunch on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We're still not getting the a la carte sales and revenue. So we do need to make sure there's cash flow in the food services. And also there's a lag in the state's reimbursement. So we need to allocate $365,463. We had $1 million that was requested of us to return back to the town to help decrease and offset the tax increase. And then additional use was to offset those grants. We have to replenish that, so it's coming from the unencumbered funds. That was 150. So as of last Monday, we have $755,278 left in the unencumbered funds. Now, again, this does not account for paying anything regarding the CARES Act or the executive order from the governor to the transportation company. These, and I'm not going to go through each of these are the items that were referred to on the previous slide that are the strategic plan items that are non-reoccurring that the board has recommended for funding using the unencumbered funds from this year. Additional unknown COVID expenses. Just that you know, the district about 3 weeks ago started COVID recovery response team planning. At this time, the teams are made up of administrators. They will be expanding to teachers, to parents, to students, and to other agencies throughout the community as we plan. Now that we have a known end of the school year in terms of how we're going to conclude our year, we are looking at these. So what we're doing is each group is creating a list of all of the potential issues that COVID has brought the district. We're looking at them as a short-term, mid-term, long-term, identifying their costs, identifying the potential issues or concerns, and then coming up with strat plans or strategic plans for each of them so that we could address the reopening of schools efficiently and effectively. Again, we are not sure as to how the schools are going to look when they reopen in the fall. We are not sure based on what we're seeing from the Center of Disease Control and state requirements, what might be needed. But we certainly are, each of these groups have been talking We have pre-purchased some PPE in preparation, because right now we do need some PPE, for example, masks in our schools while we're still active, but we also have to prepare ahead. And we wanted to make sure that we were appropriately prepared in the event that we have to offer PPE to more than just the people that we are presently offering it to as part of the executive order of the governor. What we are recommending is that whatever is left based on whatever we have to finish this year with transportation or other expenditures that come to us, we're looking to ask that the Board of Education carry over those funds and put them into the 2% account, or formerly known as 1%, to deal with other COVID response costs. We did receive a letter from the Commissioner of Education last evening with a list of recommendations, and I'm proud to say that our staff has already addressed what was on that list, and we are planning proactively to continue to move forward. One of the key things, as you could imagine, in addition to the tangible items that we need to plan for, it's the intangibles. It's the social, emotional challenges that our students might face more frequently when they return to school in whatever capacity they do. So we were fortunate, we were already planning for some tremendous professional development in that area for the district and for different levels in the district. So we have been proactive in that regards. Technology-wise, we're proactive, as well as the fact that our unencumbered funds are slated for our continued replacement cycle for Chromebooks. So we also wanted to share, because we knew this was a topic of conversation and we're almost done, is that our unexpended 1% account funds that exist right now, there was at the beginning of the year $1,947,855. Since then, we've encumbered and completed $1,017,491 worth of projects. So the remaining balance is $930,364. The special education reserve, minus the cost that I shared regarding COVID crisis, still leaves $308,373. And then there are bids that are being awarded that equate to $191,636. They're right in the process of being awarded. So the actual balance right now of all the 1% accounts from the past is $430,355. You could see that there are some items at the bottom of the page that we're getting quotes on. They need bids. It's going to be summer work for some of these things because we can't do these. We are starting some summer work, not these projects, but other jobs early because students aren't in the building, staff is not in the building. So we're actually getting a head start on some of that. But again, that's what's left for the balance in that account, because I know that was something that came up in the fall that we wanted to make sure we addressed in this presentation. So as I said earlier, and I'm not going to go through the reference materials, I'm actually going to relinquish control of the screen. But the idea is that the reference materials are here for the counselors. There's all of our enrollment information, and there's also our special education information. So I will turn this back over to the chair.
Well, thank you.
Sorry.
No need to apologize. First up is Counselor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Dr. Menzo.
Good to see you.
So I just want to make sure that I want to set myself in the head correctly here and make sure you've used the term 1% account, 2% account, and unencumbered fund balance. Is that all the same thing, or are they two different things?
They all technically are the same thing. The unencumbered, the 1% becomes the 1% account after July 1st.
Right. Rolls
So
over.
prior to June 30th or July 1st, it's unencumbered funds. And then what happened is the state changed the threshold by which to the amount that you could carry over. So in our past practice, based on statute, I believe back in 2012, it was 1%. Now it's been changed to a threshold of 2%.
Okay, great.
Not
but
by
it's
us.
yeah, so it's all the same set of funds. Okay, so
Correct.
I have, and thank you, by the way, for getting us not only the book copy that you guys send along, but then you sent along the digital update and everything that you just walked through. Is I've been going over this, so and I appreciate having all the information ahead of time. It actually answered a lot of questions I would have otherwise had, or maybe tried to give you a call. So just really quick, the open positions that you had listed, are they in the current budget, or are those open for the next budget?
These are in the current budget.
Okay, so those with those open positions that are in the current budget, that means they were put into the budget the last time for the last budget that we approved. And have they been open this entire time?
No, they unfortunately retirements, other reasons, these positions became open during the year.
Okay, so all right, so it was things that occurred as the year progressed. And now
Correct.
they've been open. Okay, perfect. So then my other two quick questions are, and then I may have a follow-up comment. With your food services line at 365, 463, that was an amount that you have to put, you've used the unencumbered fund balance for that to continue with the food services. Now, is this something that is going to be something that the school can put in for reimbursement at the state, or is this just an expenditure and we're done?
It's a combination, because we are estimating, and if everything works out, this money could come back and go into the 1% account or 2% account, whatever we call it. But the reality is that we're not certain as to where we're going to come back with our sales, because not knowing what the fall is going to look like. So if everything were to work out perfectly, yes, that would be money that then we would be going back to the council and saying, okay, we have this that would go into another account. But the reality is that we don't know that. It's such an X factor, as I'm sure you could all imagine, because we still have to pay the employees.
Right, got it. Okay, and then so
We just want to be transparent.
oh yeah, no, and I would much rather have the transparency and have to follow up about it later, without a doubt. So my next question is with transportation. So it seems like we're in kind of an odd, I use the term odd because it's not unique, because it's a couple of other places as well. We Wallingford do not pay for transportation that does not occur. So earlier on with some of the issues earlier in the year, if 80 routes were supposed to run and only 75 ran, that's what we paid for. And I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that's where we kind of find ourselves in this situation right now today, where all across the state, by and large, school systems have been paying their transportation providers because they're contract bound, and then those transportation providers have been paying their employees. And we're not bound to do that per se, because we're on a route basis and no routes are being run. Have I got the gist of it right now?
Yes and no. I think that we are on a route basis, so we do have that portion of our discussion with the bus company that we bring up. But then the other part of it is that the executive order, and well, in particular, the executive order has language that we don't necessarily, and the mayor has spoken to this, don't necessarily agree with, in the sense that if somebody's not providing a service, how can we pay for a service that's not been provided? So what we've been doing is utilizing the language, as you alluded to or stated, and having conversations about what were the actual costs for the bus company during this time to be ready for us if we had to open. Obviously, knowing today that they don't have to open, that's different. But I think that the fact is that we've really, and I know other superintendents have too, so it's not unique to Wallingford. I think the story just became unique to Wallingford. But the fact is, we know that many districts in our region who spoke about the percentages that they potentially were going to pay have not finish negotiations. So we're not alone in this, but we do have the contract language, as you stated. And then we also are having somewhat of a philosophical conversation in reference to what costs are true costs that we should have to owe at this time. And I have to say, and I want to definitely state this, the bus company has been extremely collaborative. This has not been confrontational. It has not been no raised voices, just a thoroughly positive conversation, because they know that we want to work with them and they want to work with us. So we're just taking this a little slower because it's my responsibility, in conjunction with the mayor and with Ms. Small, Attorney Small, and my business manager, Mr. Barone, to do what's right for the district. And we want to make sure we do our due diligence.
Councilor Zandri, would you mind if the mayor interrupted?
Sure.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Yes, so on this point, there's some key language in the governor's executive order. And it's also in the language at the federal level in the CARES Act. And that language is, where practicable. You know, I think it's a legitimate position to say providing money to anyone where service isn't being provided is not practical or practical. In fact, I think it breaches fiduciary duty. I don't think any official has the authority to give money to any entity where there is not a bargain for exchange of value. Otherwise, it is a gift of money. For what purpose, at that point, you can't really define. So there's a serious issue there about the responsible use and expenditure of public funds. And the order does not just say you must do this, it says where practicable. That language has to have been inserted for a purpose. And I think in our circumstance, our contract spells out what our obligations are. Other contracts perhaps state things differently and define different obligations. But I think we have to be very cautious about our protection of public money and make sure that it is used for the purposes for which it's been appropriated, and ultimately the purpose that we tax the public in order to receive that.
Very
Thank
good,
you.
very good point. So I kind of want to just add a little bit to that. So the understanding of why the majority of the towns have been compelled to make these payments was so that the bus company, any bus company, I don't want to pick on Durham, any bus company that was being paid could continue to pay their employees. Now, unless I have missed something in our own news or other news sources elsewhere, either bus companies have been paying their employees based on the fact that those different boards of ed have continued to pay on the agreements, and therefore those people got their salaries. Or in situations like many of the workers at Durham, they've been on unemployment, they've been laid off, so they're getting unemployment. And the reason I bring this up is because I've gotten people that have reached out to me and said, you know, I'm concerned about the bus drivers. They're not getting paid. If Wallingford's not paying Durham, then Durham can't pay their employees. That's true. Durham probably wouldn't be paying their employees because none of them are working. They are under layoff status, and therefore they're collecting unemployment, which on now receiving the federal stipend on top of the state unemployment, they're likely making the same amount of money they were making before, if not more. Maybe not all of them, definitely a good subset of them. So I don't want people to feel like we're not doing what's responsible and they're not getting paid, and so therefore it trickles down. That's not true. I think if anything, we're being very tactical about trying to figure out what is it that we're supposed to do. And if we're supposed to do something, let's find out what that is. And then at that time, pay for it. I think we're being very smart all the way around, but I don't want anybody to feel as if gee, the drivers aren't getting taken care of, because I believe by and large, most of them are being covered by their unemployment compensation. Exceptions aside, of course, but I don't want people to think all the bus drivers are out of work and none of them are getting anything. So based on that, Dr. Menzo, I want to make sure I can get a good understanding. At some point, some agreement will be reached. It'll be reached somewhere between the town, Durham School Services, the state. It's going to get hashed out that we should pay nothing, we should pay X, we should pay something. But I'm taking a guess, because the employees are getting unemployment, that whatever the state might say, listen, because of the CARES Act and the way that it works, we're going to calculate Wallingford sum to be a certain amount because Durham isn't paying their employees. Is that kind of correct? I mean, we wouldn't be expected to pay the full amount, which would cover salaries, when salaries are not being paid. Am I following that?
I don't think we're going to hear, we haven't heard anything from the state about that. I think that the responsibility has been my role with our business manager and Attorney Small to work with the bus company to explain exactly what you just said and work through the numbers very diligently, very deliberately, ask a lot of questions, as I said earlier, to make sure that if there is indeed something we have to pay, it represents what services we received. And I think that Durham is understanding of that. They have been very, very willing to share. And I ask a lot of questions, like many of you do. And we've asked for a lot of information. And that's why it's taking time. It's not because we're fighting or we're trying, as I said, to obstruct any executive order. We're just doing due diligence. So we will hopefully come to that agreement. And of course, the mayor and Attorney Small have to approve of all of that. But that's the direction that we're working on. But again, it does confirm what you're saying, that we're looking to identify what is that amount and what services did we receive and what services should we be paying for.
Okay, and then just one final thing for me, because I just want to make sure that I understand all the numbers that I have here. Have you either allocated or actually spent the unencumbered fund balance down to zero? Is that what you had on that slide, or
No,
all right, so
no.
can you help explain that to me then?
Sure. So I'll put up the slide you should be
Yeah, that's
seeing right
what I'm
now.
looking for. Yep.
So it's the April 20th at the operations committee meeting, April 20th, which was kind of like the shot heard around the world because everybody just focused on the $3.2 million and didn't necessarily listen to the whole conversation that occurred that evening. That was a projection, and that was one of three that we could have presented to the Board of Education that evening. This was if nothing was paid to anyone based on executive orders. We could have done one that showed if we had to pay the whole thing, that we were responsible for 100%. We could have made a guesstimate and said we're going to pay 50%. What would that look like? But again, the way that we've done this in 11 years hasn't done me wrong. We've just told the truth as to, at that point, what was our unencumbered fund balance, which was $3.2 million. The board had already previously committed to purchases for curriculum based on the fact that we were coming out of the budget process, but then we were moving into the COVID crisis. So those were committed, nothing's been purchased. So that's where you get the next line item. The strategic plan items you saw on the next page. So when you go through this whole thing, even with the mayor's request of the $1 million to offset the tax increase, at present time, today, and this could have said May 5th, we have $755,278 that is not appropriated.
Two more slides in on slide 32. It runs the balance down to zero. Can you explain to me that difference there?
Well, what this does is that on the slide, you're talking about the unknown expenses, or, oh no, I'm sorry. That balance, this 1% account, are you looking at the remaining 1% account? Yeah. That's not this number. These are the old 1% accounts, the ones that we were getting questions on in October through the media and through counselors about the fact that there were previous 1% accounts that had not been fully expended. So this is old money. This is showing, and we explained at that time that there were projects that just did not go through because of timing, because of bids. So this is separate money. These have already been approved by the town council. So these were monies that started, 2012, well, 13, 14, 15, not necessarily using all the money because things had to be processed. So these are different funds.
Got it. All right, can you go back 2 slides where you were just a moment ago?
This one?
One more where they had the original, that one there. Yep, thank you. So I just want to call out the 5th line, I guess it is, the funds returned to the town to offset the tax increase. I just want to confirm that this is a reduction out of this unencumbered fund balance, so that what we might have to present or receive from the, I should say, what was presented by the mayor to us is actually $1 million lower because we were able to get these funds back from the Board of Ed. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct.
All right, because a lot of the questions that we've all had up to this point, of other departments has been, if you had to do with 1 or 2% less, because we're looking for places to, to try to pull back funding from, to try to get us down to 0. I really want to call out that line, because to me, you've already done that. We're already tightening the belts on a lot of these items. And then this line, you guys said, well, if we need to kind of march to the tune, we could probably do this. And this is $1 million that doesn't show up as a part of the tax increase this year, because it comes out of here and it straps down that end number. So I want to call that out and make sure that that is presented in evidence so that people understand that. So that's $1 million off our bottom line.
If I may just comment, and the mayor knows this because he and I are very close, and he talks, and we talked last week. I'm personally probably getting criticized. I shouldn't say possibly. There's critical analysis of this whole $1 million going over to the town, not necessarily from the taxpayers of Wallingford, but from others. And I think that I'm comfortable with it. I'm nervous in a way because we don't know what the expenses of COVID are truly going to be. However, I have always been in this role, and the board has always been supportive and had the same mindset that we are partners with all other agencies in town and all their departments. And our responsibility is to make sure that the taxpayers provide us what we need, and we do the best we can with what we need. But if we have more than what we need, as was evidenced a few years back, we've made the effort to be good partners and good stewards of partnership by providing that. So I know that many might think we should have maybe put up more of a fight, so to speak. But I think that, again, looking at our budget, we continue to utilize lean philosophies. So we've done a lot to continue to make our budget efficient, like all superintendents are doing across the state. But I just wanted to say that because it has been an interesting time. But I think that, I shouldn't say I think, I am confident in what we are doing. And I feel our board is in support of what we're doing.
Well, I appreciate what you and the board have done to try to make it so that, we as the counselors can take this budget in and try to drive down the cost of increases. And this helps us a lot. Obviously the mayor put it together by working with all the department heads, you and the board and so forth. But this goes a long way. So I personally wanted to call it out, and I personally wanted to say thank you. And so thank you very much for answering my questions. And I want to let others that have questions go ahead. So thank you again, Dr. Menzo.
You're welcome.
Councillor Laffin is up.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Jason asked a lot of my questions. So thank you, Jason. But Dr. Menzo, I have some clarification. So the unencumbered account right now is 3.3 million. that right?
Correct.
And then with all that spending that's on the screen now, it brings it down to 755. The committed to purchase, when were those decisions made? You stated it, but I think I missed it when I was.
Well,
writing
those
them down.
committed to purchase, those are the consensus items that we do throughout the year. So the curriculum was done back at the beginning of the COVID crisis. So I think it was like February, if I'm not mistaken, because we were preparing. And then the strategic plan was more recent, as well as obviously the food services.
Food services, right? And
'Cause
that
this-
number that we're fronting for food services right now, because the state is slow, is 532. Is that right?
Well,
Yes.
the food service is a combination. It's not just because there's a lag potentially in reimbursements. It's we have no revenue. So we
No,
need
right,
to
right.
we need to have cash flow to pay our staff.
Okay. And then, and what do you have any concept of what the state is looking to reimburse you for? I know you might not get it for months. I'm just trying to think it out.
The food services amount, I don't know exactly. We haven't gotten any clarity on that. I do know that we have been getting some information on the CARES Act, which is separate, that it's going to be your Title I funds and approximately 83% of that. But again, there's been really great communication, but I think everybody's still working through all the documents.
And then we'll get that money. When we get that money, you said you come back and then, well, what would we do with it then? Kind of like wash out the balance or put it in 1% because you're kind of paying for it now?
The two parts of it, the food services money, we would flesh out the balance. We try to take the food services account to where it needs to be, and then the rest in the 1%. The CARES Act, which is separate, that money we would hope to use to offset the 214,000 gap that I showed based on what the mayor has proposed and what the board originally proposed.
Okay. And then how much money would we have spent? Do we know this? How much money would we have paid the bus company to date that we haven't paid? But what's that number that would really be cutting down on that 3.3 million or the 755?
It's about it would have been about 2.3 million.
2.3 million. Okay.
Approximately.
We'd be, so this 3.2 number would be 2.8 less.
2.3 less.
2.3 less. Okay. So we'd have about $1 million, and then with the committed to purchase items, there wouldn't be.
Well, we wouldn't have
committed.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been able to commit to purchase those. We would have the 400,000 for the curricular purchases that would have been definitely strongly needed. We would have had to defer the strategic plan items, and we would have had to make sure we were good on the food services. So those would have been the first two things, and then we would have seen where the year ended.
So the commit to purchase that came after the board realized that they were going to have some savings.
Correct.
On the transportation line. Okay, that makes sense to me.
Correct.
So what I'm trying to get at, I'm trying to figure out how much of that, I know it's all confusing, right? How much of that is extra? So there's this $1 million that's being kind of given back or won't be processed into the 1% or 2% fund, right? So there's this $1 million that's going to go back to the general fund that's going to offset taxes for next year. And then was it 2 years ago the board gave money back to, or was that last year?
2 years ago.
In a similar situation, there was enough, and you're like, we're not going to move this into the 2% fund, take it back type of thing. I'm trying to figure out, and I know the bus transportation money kind of messes it all up, but because the $1 million that's free now is part of the base or root of the dollars that's getting increased for next year. So I'm trying to figure out if that extra $1 million, if that commit to purchase money is all from the savings of transportation, then the $1 million still could have existed. It might have been used at the end of the year to commit to purchases. But that $1 million that's kind of extra, and this is in addition to the 755, is part of a base number that the increase given so far is on top of. Does that make sense of what I'm kicking
Yeah,
around?
because again, because we haven't paid for a service at $2.3 million that we have to pay for next year.
Right. Okay.
So you
Yeah,
can't,
I think, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, plus 9%. So it's remember the contract was renegotiated because we had to go back out to bid. So I think that to the point you're making, I think you went through it very, very well. I think at this point, the 755, 278 is there to determine what we have to do with the bus company. And then really beyond that, as I said, my recommendation, because we're still figuring out, and I'm sure Representative Fishbein knows all the stuff that's going on with different recommendations, as well as everybody else about COVID. We don't know how much more money we're going to need to allocate into other line items for services for the fall. So the worst thing that we can do is put ourselves in a position where we overcut and then we're coming back to the council for more money, which I know that's not what anybody wants us to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, I think what you were saying was kind of my point, and I think what I'm trying to grasp completely or communicate to other people is that the extra money is part of a recurring base.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So it's
perfect.
So the increase that we're giving, right? So the increase that we're giving is part of a recurring base that, in different scenarios, some of would have gone towards the bus transportation services. Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Laffin, that's an awesome point, because people also, I get nervous because people are like, well, just fill your gap with the unencumbered funds, but then we set ourselves up for a deficit the following year. And I think you were on the board when I first arrived, that caused a lot of problems. And so then you're always kind of buying reoccurring expenses with funds from the prior year, and we don't want to get back into that routine.
Yeah, no, and when I was on board, there was a big effort to never spend the extra money on recurring expenses. It was always non-recurring. It was Dale Wilson's big thing, and before that too. Yeah, and so I totally get that. And even on the government side now, I'm a big don't spend the money on recurring, non-recurring expense type of thing. I mean, that's my big battle when trying to get to a zero budget increase. I have a question that's related to this, but that maybe the mayor or Mr. Bose can answer, and that is the and it just escaped me. We're talking about the $1 million. Oh, if the Board of Ed, let's say we're opening up in August and September, and the Board of Ed needed a lot more money because of different COVID increases or things that they had to do to kind of climb out and get the schools back ready in an unexpected manner. And they knew out of the gate they were going to hit a deficit, and it was not sustainable. What's the process? What would happen after that? Could the Board of Ed come back and we could give more money, like out of the state of the surplus general fund, rainy day fund, whatever everybody calls it? Is that how that would go? Like, they're not bound to be stuck to this number and run red forever, right? We could, if we gave them not enough now, they could come back and we would be able to make the decision later on whether to cover those costs. Is that correct?
Jim Bowles here, Tom. Ultimately, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. It would be an appropriation out of the reserves, if you will, to fund balance utilization, and then an appropriation to the school board budget for amounts in that case.
Okay.
That's basically, hopefully, one reason why we have reserves, if that would happen.
Right.
If we were to think that if there's going to be any grant reimbursement, we don't know. And I think Dr. Menzel hit this right on the head pretty good. It's that we don't know what reimbursements will be coming. We don't know when. there's many different programs. There's some confusion as to, what funds may be coming to us from either the Fed, the state, or from, the federal government through the state in all these programs. So if it's amount above and beyond all of that, that money certainly would replace the reserves. But if it was a timing thing, and Doc Menzo needed to know, like right then and there,
Yeah.
because I'm pretty sure he's going to have to know, because he's going to make the hiring decisions and whatnot. Then that's something that would have to be addressed by reserves. Now, if he has to do something like physical construction in regards to classroom situation or auditoriums, things of that nature, we'd have to maybe take a look at that and see the nature of its life expectancy and other things that we would use to potentially, extract that portion from what might be considered operational and possibly put together an authorization for a bond issue for that. I don't know. I don't know if Doc even knows right now, but we'll, we're going to get there. Hold on, I think the mayor wants to comment as well.
Yeah, I would say if we face some cataclysmic type of situation, a lot of facts have to come into play. What other money is available within budgets to handle expenses? I would have to assume that general government would be confronted with some of those same unknown costs. So where budgets can be redirected, and maybe we can't spend all of our budget the way we anticipated, and it would have to be shifted over. If it's amounts well beyond that, and if it's of a serious enough nature, you ultimately could deal with another tax assessment. But there would be a lot of analysis and adjustment that would have to occur before we'd be automatically looking to just provide new money.
Yeah, okay, and that makes sense. And I guess I wanted to know that, we could go back if we needed to. And then, of course, we'd have to decide, given the situation, what did we want to do? And then, right, if the Board of Ed's having issues, then the general government side is probably having issues too. That all makes sense to me. That's basically it, except Dr. Menzo, great presentation. Can you forward that to the counselors, or so that we have a copy of it all said and done for some of the numbers?
The town clerk has it. I had asked.
Okay.
And I'm sure she could send it along.
Okay, thank you. And if it was sent already and I missed it, I apologize, Barbara. But just so that I had on paper, that's fine. All right, or on screen. Thank you. That's it for now.
Next up is Councilor Morgenstein. You have to unmute your mic.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, a little technical difficulty here with your slideshow, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Menzo. So I had a few questions. The meals, and again, we've talked reimbursed, but just the doing meals, appreciated, so important. When you say you're doing that on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, are people being invited enough meals that it carries them 5 days, or is it really 3 days?
No, it's for all 5 days. They're just picking up 2 meals on Monday, 2 meals on Wednesday, and then the Friday. So they're getting 5 days. It's just helped us, like most districts have gone to 3 days just because of staffing and rotating staff through because of safety.
Yeah, that's perfect, that you're not in contact as often, but they're getting what they need. Good. Okay, I was hoping that's going to be the answer. Okay.
We did the same thing.
And just to clarify, your loss of staff numbers, this staff did not include any layoffs in that loss of staff. That was all in other ways.
I'm sorry, I missed a couple of words you said.
So you gave us a few different slides of losing of staff, retirement, various things. Am I clear that none of that loss of staff was layoffs?
Oh, no, there are going to be some layoffs based on this. In terms of certified staff, there will be layoffs. And in terms of, some of them won't be layoffs because we are having retirements, which they could be filled, but there's going to be probably at least 5 layoffs in the certified staff. And then in terms of the non-certified staff, there will be at least 8 layoffs. And we factored in the unemployment within our budget.
So to really clarify down to the nuts and bolts, certified staff is teachers, accountants, and other professional
Certified-
positions?
Correct, professional positions, and then non-certs are your paraeducators, your clerical
Para-
staff, your maintenance staff, so on and so forth.
Mm.
Classified employees predominantly.
Yeah, that's a lot of layoffs. Okay, and then this is where I've lost your,
But I wanna-
my ability to see.
Mrs. Morgenstein, if I could just clarify, those layoffs are due to the fact that the services are not required. Those are not layoffs to meet the bottom line of the mayor's budget or any proposal. Those are because of enrollment decreases and because of changes in services.
Well, so here, and so over the years, such things as like APs, have we to say that we have less of a need, changed any of our requirements for, and I'll just throw this out as a, because there may be other things that I'm less aware of that fall into a similar category. There was a time where, and I'm just going to make up numbers, if you had 10 people interested in an AP course, you would offer it. And then if you move it to 15, and only, 13 people want to sign up for it, then you don't offer that class. Have we done things that manner in order to say don't have the need?
Well, we don't run classes with less than, usually less than 10 students because it's not an appropriate use of that resource. We try to combine AP classes or levels rather than just not running the class. So what we'll do is if it's a level 4 and say a 4 and a 5 in a language, we might combine the two because there might be only 5 students in 4 and there might be 6 students in 5. So we'll still run it with 10 because now we're meeting the needs of 2 different groups of students, but we're not, we can't as a district, and I don't believe there are many districts who could run classes of 4, 3, 6, 7, 8 students. It's also inequity when you have teachers because a teacher who teaches those classes, their total caseload might be 5 classes of 8, which is 40, while someone who's teaching your academic classes might have a caseload of 100. So we do have to look at all those factors, but in this budget, we did look at our class loads because again, we look at them at the end of the year and oftentimes they're about 20, 18, 16 at the high school level. And then over the summer, those same classes drop down when the kids get the AP work and they realize sometimes that it's a lot more than they had bargained for. Those classes start the year again at much lower numbers, 6, 8, 7. And so we really did need to look at that closely.
Okay, thank you. And then some of the slide where you had listing of things that had specifically requested from the mayor. And I'm just gonna.
Sal, can you hear her audio?
No, I can't.
All right, Councilor Morgenstein, we seem to have lost your audio.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what happened. Okay. So I have a list of a few things that you had asked of the mayor, and I'm just going to read the whole list. And then if we can talk back and forth a little bit about them. There were some stage lights, I believe, at an elementary school. There was an oil tank at Moran, an increase of 2 greeters. Those were 3 things that stood out a little bit to me as to, again, you've already given us $1 million back, but could you elaborate a bit on the time of the need for those?
Well, I'll start with the 2 staff members. The greeters were added because we're reestablishing programs. So there's not the need for the clerical. So that's how we have the reduction for the clerical. And then the addition of the greeters just because of the proximity of the location of those programs in those 2 schools. So it's the actual, they kind of tie together. There's a reduction of a clerical staff member and the addition of the greeters, but then there's a net savings there. So those are actually physical employees. In terms of the other items that were requested as capital, these are part of our strategic plan. And these are reviewed, as you know, on an annual basis, and they're reviewed with the principals. And these are prioritized by our building and grounds director and then reviewed and vetted by the Board of Education. So a lot of them are dealing with some safety, and that's really where we focused on our safety items. So the blacktop or the pavement up at Highland, that's a safety, it's cracking. We need to make sure that that gets replaced to avoid any future challenges. The technology, information technology, there's AC, there's air conditioning. Obviously, you all know that if you have large servers, you need to make sure they're air conditioned appropriately. Otherwise, your investment in those servers is somewhat compromised. The oil tank is a requirement of the state that we do have to replace oil tanks on a schedule. So that's a safety requirement. The cabinets and the countertops and lavatory partitions, that was one that's been on the list for many years. And so that was moving forward. And again, when you look at these items that the mayor has granted the $459,600, these have to be items that have longevity to them. So there's some key pieces there. And then we have all the other maintenance areas. So I hope that explains, but we tried to look at safety first as a key piece.
Yes, and then one other that stood out to me. So the Rock Hill parking, I had a more specific question about. That a need based on school time need, or we had the problem during the election? And I guess that's the simplest way just to ask that question.
It's school time need. We presently rent the parking lot of the church that's across the street on the upper parking lot of Rock Hill. During the day, it's virtually impossible to have events for families without having to need additional parking.
Okay, and I literally just received a message from a parent asking to further ask about the AP courses. We have AP courses that are above 25, which is a very large caseload. On the other side, the lower level classes seem to be kept in smaller numbers due to, and again, I'm not familiar with these terms, 504s and IEPs. If you could.
Yes,
maybe
well, I think the
explain
parent answered the question, actually asked and answered, because the fact is that AP students are generally higher performing students who are generally self-directed. We don't have many classes of that, so I would have to actually look and pull that up in PowerSchool, which I won't do now because I'll lose my screen and lose my picture. But the reality is that our general classes are classes that are smaller because the student needs are greater. And that when I say smaller, they're not classes of 8 and 10 like some of our APs. Those classes usually we try to keep them at no more than 20 or 22, but they're not at class sizes of some of our APs that we've previously run even this year of 7, 6, 8, 11. So again, it's an educational decision that we work very diligently with the principals. The principals really are the ones who are loading the system, the scheduler, and they look very closely at the scheduler. And we have to be mindful that just the configuration of our middle school, the way that we have it set up, because it's a teaming structure like all middle schools, our middle school students, oftentimes our middle school classes are 24, 26 just because of the schedule. And those are heterogeneously grouped. When you get into an AP class, that's more of a homogeneous group of students. And they're, again, there's a range of the size. Our principals do a wonderful job trying to maximize the schedule so that students get all the offerings that we do provide. We offer, as you know, and I know your children have taken advantage of, and I know many others have a wide range of ECE AP courses. And we still offer honors courses. So I think, again, it's challenging. We do not want to close classes. We do not want to have large classes. But again, the fact is we do have to balance. And I think that what we do is, I think we do a fairly good job of it. And I think our administrators deserve the credit for how hard they work to make sure those classes run and that they do provide the needs and meet the needs of those students.
And you feel that the lower level classes, you're using examples into the 20s, that the lower level classes are small enough to meet those children's needs?
We really try to keep them smaller, and every so often, and we have to look at what resources. We have to look at what resources are in those classes, because oftentimes there might be additional resources. It might be a co-taught class with a special educator. It might be a para-educator might be in the room. So depending on this section and who might be in that class, a class might be able to be a student or two higher because there's another set of hands or more than that. And that's the same thing at the elementary level. I mean, we stay firm to our numbers at the elementary level, but many times when you walk through school, you'll see that there are many adults. I should say many. There are more than one adult in many classrooms due to the fact that we are very strategic in our staffing to meet the needs of students.
Yeah, I'm certainly appreciative of lean philosophies. Unfortunately, even if it's through attrition and such, while I'm happy to see $1 million come back to the government side, it sounds like there are concerns on class sizes in general, and that's been.
I would have to say, I would respectfully say that our class sizes are not a problem in our district. I think there are going to always be pockets of a class or two that are higher, and if we pick those, yes. And if each year you try to lower those classes or level them, you're going to continue to add staff every single year that's not going to necessarily be utilized to its fullest potential. So I don't believe that we have a class size issue. I think we have pockets that every district in every state, I guarantee you, has the same challenges. So I think that the principals do a wonderful job of trying to balance it. It is a balance, and it's not a budgetary balance. We don't set our budget based on the fact that we're going to reduce this many staff members. We set our budget based on what we need for appropriate levels of service for our students in our district. So, and that $1 million has no bearing, so to speak, because it's in this year's budget of 1920, not recommended for 2021. We're trying to close the gap, which I think that has the bearing which you're bringing to light, which I agree with you 100%. But the reality is that, again, I'd be cautious, and I just have to speak up because I know how hard our administrators work with the department heads to make certain that we are providing class sizes that students can be successful in.
Okay. I have one more question for you, but I'd like to ask Mr. Bose a question before that. Am I correct? The numbers, Mr. Bose, you gave us when the question was asked of trying to do a $0 tax increase that gave us a $1.3 million figure was after this give back of $1 million from the BOE?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I just want to be sure. And then the last group of questions that I have for you, Dr. Menzo, you and I had met over the winter, and I had, so much has happened since then, but we had sat down and discussed what I had brought up at the budget last year. Last year, we talked about really wanting our cost toward education, and so insurance, care. Again, I'm not visualizing your slide. You gave it a term now of what we're calling this 1.8+ million money, and what could happen if that were moved to the government side. I forget what we decided to call it. I can't slide.
We labeled the slide saying that it was maintenance expenses that could be transferred to the town. So
Okay, yeah.
that was,
So my philosophy had been maintenance expenses deferred to the town, and we had you look into the state reimbursement, the fact that you have rules about BOE budgets ever being allowed to decrease. And we had lengthy discussions about if there were money that could be moved when we're faced with times where your expenses continue to go up, if there is money that's offset to the other side. And when we're having these discussions, and I apologize, I don't want to offend anyone when we start having class size discussions and such, that we could perhaps be gradually discussing things more purely education and not maintenance side. So if you could expound a bit on the rules, and we may need Mr. Bose to answer some questions, but this idea of maintenance expenses to the government side, and that was my request of you to look at and get that information.
so my part of it, and then Mr. Bose would probably get into more of the technical piece. My part was just to provide you with the items that we saw as transferable over to the town side, and they were a lot of the supplies, a lot of the those material pieces. So that's what you see making up the $1.8 million. Mr. Bose would be able to speak to the technical piece. I know we cannot, as you mentioned, and you know this very, very well, you've done your homework, you've done a good job, is that you know that as a school district, we can't go below what we received the prior year in our funding. We have to have that minimum funding requirement. If the district chose to do this, and for whatever reason we did go below, but we were still maintaining services, we would have to file with the state for them to understand. But Mr. Bose probably knows more about the other aspects than I.
Is he here?
No, not really. I don't know as far as some of the legality involved, but if it's an attempt to move monies from one budget to another, I mean, that's not hard to do from an operational standpoint of just moving the money or moving the appropriation to spend, I should say. But it's just, you have a legal question there. If that money is now not in the school's budget, can the school spend it? Who spends it? I was asked this, I believe, last budget season, and I unfortunately, I have to give you the same answer. I'm not an attorney, and I don't really want to go there, to be honest with you, as far as rendering legal advice that may not be accurate. But as far as setting up some bookkeeping and stuff like that, that is not a problem at all.
Right. Now, my understanding from Dr. Menzo is although he would still have to provide some additional information, it did not sound like state regulation wise, it sounded like a legal problem. It sounded more that it would need to be specified. We are not cutting programs. We are not
Correct.
lessening education services, these sorts of things. So again, given everything that's going on, he has, what already was a huge job has become so much more. But I want to have us consider this, please. And I want to hold the right to ask some more questions again after, but I'm going to yield now. Thank you so much, everybody.
Counselor Tata, you're up.
Hi, Dr. Menzo.
Hi.
Thanks so much, first of all, for all of your hard work during these crazy times. I certainly appreciate that we have you at the helm during this, so thank you for everything. My first question is, on slide, I took note of the number in case you don't know off the top of your head, but on slide 27, you had talked about an added cost of $220,000 due to the pandemic, and you said it was for transport and tuition. Can you just explain what the added transportation would be?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the compliment, but I just want to say that I'm only a small piece of the huge puzzle in Wallingford Public Schools right now. Our teachers, our paras, everybody working so hard to respond to the crisis. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I just extend that to them because they're the ones that are in the trenches every day. We're doing the coordination and we're working different hours, but we're all working together. So, but thank you very much. In terms of this question, the tuitions would be for added district tuitions for special needs students who, special education students who cannot be serviced in our district due to the fact that maybe there's been a gap that has occurred as of during being out of school. So the tuition would be for the actual school costs, and then the transportation would be to get to that school because it would be out of our district.
Okay, so this is additional transportation
Correct.
during the pandemic for that. Okay.
Or as a result of the pandemic. So it would be, we have to project right now, we have students that are outplaced, they're receiving services based on the facilities that they've been going into and attending during the time. Our students in special ed that are in our district are receiving services through our special ed teachers who are working incredibly hard, meeting with students several times a week virtually. The thing is that based on that, as PPTs begin, we didn't really stop, we kept going. We know that there's potentially some students who will be identified who need services that were not anticipated prior to the pandemic that will need them after. So these most likely be services that we'd be looking to start in the fall at some point for some students. They haven't been identified yet, but we do know based on caseload review and talking to teachers and talking to our director that we could be certain that we're going to have expenses.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
No
My
worries.
My next question is the contingency line in this budget. Looks like in the mayor's budget, it's 50,000. Do you know in the current budget how much contingency you've spent?
Yes. First of all, I think that one thing that we need to explain is that when the mayor gets to his bottom number, and Mr. Bose probably does this, I'm not going to blame Mr. Bose, but they just allocate funds. We will regardless of how this all works out, our contingency next year will still be 357,193, because that's what we believe we need in order to address the different issues, be it negotiations, things that may be occurring. We always put in for transportation. Right now, we started the year at over 343,000. We're down to 255,949. What happens is that as the year progresses and as we finish the year, we're going to true up that account because we end up naturally overrunning some accounts, especially this year. So some of the funds that were put into contingency weren't drawn from contingency, and the board knows this. They were drawn from the account that they came from, the cost center. So like, for example, in contingency, there's always money for additional technology that needs to come up because of either special needs student or because of like this situation, COVID. So to answer your question though, the number that we're right now is 255,949. And we had budgeted 343,949.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, that makes sense about the different line items too. So thanks for that. And one question about the lease that central office is currently in for your building. When does that lease expire, and how much is that either per month or per year, whatever is easier?
We have one more year on that lease after this year, this coming year. And I'm just pulling up.
And that was a 5-year lease?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll have to get back to you on the or my business manager's looking for it. He's on the other side of the room, so it's unlike.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't need it right this second. If you want to get back
We
to me or
usually just pass stuff to each other, but we can't be that close.
Yeah, that's fine.
He's gonna make it into a paper airplane and fly it over.
All right. Well, I'll ask my next question while he's constructing that.
Sure.
I know you went through certain things that changed because of the pandemic, but one thing I didn't hear, and I don't know if this is a number you can give me as a whole, but I would assume because of the pandemic, there were savings in regards to athletics, coaches, stipends for coaches, theatrical performances that couldn't happen. Do you have an idea, or is there a way to calculate what those savings would be?
Yes, in our last financial forecast that we did for the Board of Education, which is on our website, we put and this is what I'll be honest, it got us in trouble with some others, is that we put a column that said COVID-19 adjustment. And in that, we put what we believed based on not having the school days, what we would save in certain accounts. So for example, tuition, there was going to be some savings because there were some closures and we had to work with families. So that was estimated at approximately 150,000. Transportation, that's where we were at the projection that we mentioned earlier. Salaries, we had projected about 445,000 because that ties in a lot of what you're talking about, plus leaves of absences. We had already projected prior to that because of leaves of absences, we had projected approximately 370, we're in a deficit actually in salaries. And then with the COVID, we went up to a positive 445,000, 521. So unemployment, we obviously went the opposite direction. We were doing really, really well prior to COVID. And then we're estimating that unemployment is going to be in deficit of about $125,000. So we did this. I can, if the council would like, I could send it through the clerk, the latest document that we reviewed with the board just last week.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's easy. We'll just pull it.
Great, thank you. And that was my only other question, unless
I have the question.
The airplane.
I have it. It did fly, and there was a center seat open. And the lease for South Turnpike is 149,453.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you,
No
Mr.
worries.
Chairman.
Up next is Counselor Testa. Counselor Testa, are you there?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm actually, I have nothing right now. My questions have been answered, and I'm just going to keep listening. Thank you.
Counselor Shortell, you're on.
Well, I don't know if I'm on. We'll find out. But hey, Sal,
How are you?
doing all right. I need a haircut, really, really
You and
bad.
me both. You and me both. A lot of product work in here.
Yeah, right. All right. Just to go back to some other points, you mentioned the I think 11 and a half FTEs that were reductions because they were services they are not needed in the forthcoming year. Do I have the number right?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
How many the FTEs that you've eliminated or reduced because the services weren't
11.5.
needed?
11.5.
And none of those were repurposed for something else, correct? That's a straight reduction, or were any of those repurposed?
No, those are a straight reduction.
Okay. You know, a lot of talk about class sizes. When was the last time the Board of Ed formally looked at your guidelines and voted on them?
We have not looked at class sizes. Well, definitely last time we had elementary discussions and well, middle school and high school was back in 2009, 10. Just so you know, I did pull up on Power School. The highest AP class is 25 students and the average is 16.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking this from really the opposite point of view as Councilman Morgenstein. I'm just asking if you looked
No,
at
I
it,
just,
you know,
yeah, I was just giving
from
information.
the other, like I know, understood. I appreciate that. I think there's certainly the conventional wisdom today is you got to go small, 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 and I'm just sort of saying, well, you know, maybe not. I don't know. I just figured I just wanted to
I think
ask when the last time the Board of Ed
yeah,
looked
the
at
last
it.
time, was 11 years ago. I personally think that I think our class sizes are appropriate. I think some of them we would love to have always smaller. But I think that in general, I think our elementary, I would definitely not recommend those be raised. I mean, the board can review this. Obviously, Ms. Levac is on the call, so I'm sure she could take note of that. But I think that middle school is tough, like I mentioned earlier, because of the team structure. So depending on a bubble class, sometimes those classes are a little bit bigger. And the high school overall, I mean, yes, there are classes every so often, like German. Sometimes we have to combine two because, obviously it's not easy to run a smaller class of German or multiple classes. But I hear what you're saying, and I can definitely write that down for the board to consider.
No, I'm not trying to give. I think I've always told people from when I met you, I view you're somebody who I believe runs the district very much like you take a very, and I mean this as a compliment, like a business would. No, what I mean by a business is constantly looking at how they do things. A business does not do the same thing over and over and over because that is a business will fail. So I think that you've always been somebody who shakes things up and questions, well, how am I doing things? And I think though class size is a sacred cow, and I would sort of argue, if it's been 11 years since you've looked at it, maybe it's something to look at, and maybe it's not a cookie cut like you just said. Elementary is different from high school and maybe middle. I don't know. I just was throwing it out there. I was frankly just curious because I know every year it comes up as like a pillar of the foot. We managed to this class size. And I'm just curious. Well, when was the last time you looked at it? That was kind of all my intention was. In
No worries.
Okay, I'm just going to jump around. Given the experience you're accumulating now with distance learning across all the grades, is one of the lasting changes of COVID, are snow days a thing of the past?
I am.
And I'm not even joking. I'm
Yeah, no,
legitimately
I'm not.
asking that.
Yeah, no, I'm not. It's not within my control as superintendent to make that decision. That would be a decision made by the State Board of Education under the direction of the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona.
You can't decide that. So like if you're saying that you could not keep, if it was gonna, like back when it used to snow, like 2 years ago, you're saying that that could not be a local decision. You could not say on December 10th when there was a snow day because the roads were bad, we're going to have distance learning and we're not going to tack that day on in June. You're saying that's a state decision?
No, there was a pilot that the state was actually undertaking this year with South Windsor, ironically enough, prior to the
Okay.
pandemic. But there was, I don't know where they ended up with that. I know that the previous commissioner, Dr. Wenzel, was very involved and intrigued by that concept. But again, it would be beyond my control just to say that Wallingford Public Schools were going to change all snow days to distance learning. Do I think it's a good idea? I think, you know, if I were king for the day, I might say that districts could maybe use up to so many to maybe not use all of them, because I think a snow day every so often, and I know maybe people don't want to hear this, but aren't a bad thing for everyone. I think sometimes teachers need a snow day, sometimes administrators need a snow day, sometimes students need a snow day. But I do think that if we can utilize those days in any way moving forward, I think that would be positive. I think that the positive also is that we've gained so much knowledge about the use of technology during distance learning, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it in the middle. And I think there are skills that our students are learning and our teachers are learning that I would hope we wouldn't lose track of and just let go, because whenever, fortunately, the pandemic is over, that I don't want to lose some of those skills. So it's kind of like evaluating, what do we keep, what do we change, stop, and keep, you know, the old method. And I think that's something we'd have to look at, but I don't have control to make that decision. But I know other superintendents have spoken to the commissioner. I know that it's come up several times, but I think everybody's so caught up, obviously, rightfully so, in our immediate present.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to talk about, and this may be for Mr. Bose and the mayor as well, just so I understand that the procedure when it comes to the $1 million that you have agreed to generously give back, that would functionally, maybe it's even you, Chairman Cervoni, that would functionally happen in September, correct? That would happen. So really what we're projecting is, if I look at your slide 33, Dr. Menzo, no, not slide 33, slide 30, you were projecting as of a week ago or so, $755,000 in your unencumbered funds balance, but it's really 1.7 million because the million is in there. You're pointing out that it's not going to be, but then we're going to take action in the fall on really, if this projection is true, holds up, 1.7 million, and then based on the mayor's recommendation and your recommendation, we are going to give you back the 755 into the 2% account, and we're going to take the other million and put it in the general fund, and that happens
Correct.
in September. I'll stop. That's correct. Okay. So now I'm going to get, controversial. I mean, the council in theory in September could ignore both of your recommendations and say, no, Dr. Menzo, you keep the million because we love education. Or we could say, gosh, you got so much, you're rolling in money. We're going to actually go and take 1.3 million. I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just asking the question, are those scenarios also potentially correct? Anybody?
You want me to take that one, Doc?
I would be happy for you to take that one.
Well, everyone likes you, so I may as well answer it. No. But Dr. Menzo, if all of this comes true the way it's projected, which of course it won't, but hopefully it'll be somewhere close. Dr. Menzo's request for the 2% fund allocation in September, after they've closed the books and made their ED 001 report to the state, will request $755,278. $1 million would be closed at the end, assuming that at the end of this fiscal year, that everything goes the way it is, sort of on these slides, and what we're hoping, obviously, that money's gonna be just lapsing, just like it does in the police department, fire department, comptroller's department, as unspent. So what you're gonna end up seeing, for your June 30th reports, that we run for you prior to to Doc and his folks coming before you to allocate funds to the 2% fund, will be Board of Education summary that shows, on our accounting system, the way you get your monthly reports, showing $1.7 million unspent. That's what it's gonna show. Then Doc is gonna ask you of, well, we haven't spoken about this yet, frankly, the 30 details, so to speak. But their request will be for $755,000 at that point.
Yeah, I
No,
think,
no, it's not. After they close. Does that make sense, Councilman?
Yeah, so you're saying that by virtue of us passing this budget, unless we change the 1 million in the budget process, the 1 million would stand, and we're only taking action on the 755 in September, is what you're saying.
Or another amount, because the million, if everything works according to these slides, and I certainly hope they do, I think everybody hopes they do, or even better. But then you would be approving anything you want up to the 1.755 million.
That was
However,
my initial point. Yeah, that was my initial point, was that we could do that.
however, you're gonna have to change the mayor's budget this month, or whatever you folks adopt. I believe it's tentatively scheduled for later this month, to reduce the use of the fund balance, because that's what it really is at the end of the fiscal year, this fiscal year into next year, by $1 million, because that's almost like an internal revenue that's not going to come true. And instead of, and Mrs. Morgenstein's question of the 1 million, almost 1,280,000, I believe is what the numbers you were looking for to reduce costs to come up with the same mill rate as this year, that's now 2.280 million.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Right. Okay.
Does that, I hope that's clear. If not, I can try again.
No, I think that makes sense. We'll be really okay. So the million, any effort, really the million is when when and if the budget passes, that's how the million, if the million passes with it, and then it's just really whatever is above that number. So thank you, Mr. Bose. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Completely switching gears, Doc Menzo. Can I call you Doc Menzo, or is that just like a thing you and Jim do? I don't want to.
That's fine.
I don't want to be
No,
too familiar. Okay.
I'm good. I'm good.
You are.
Actually,
You're still.
wait, Mr. Shortell, you're supposed to call me Iron Man?
Yeah. Right. I don't know if that. Counselor Fishbein is in charge of the superhero designations. You are still getting, I believe you have an arrangement with Chief Wright, and you're still having a sort of a Wallingford police presence, I believe, in the 2 high schools and the 2 middle schools. Is it
Correct.
20 hours a week? Could you give me a little more detail on that? 20 hours a week, I think, but I could be
It's
wrong.
approximately 20 hours a week. I mean, it depends, because sometimes they have trainings and other things that they're pulled for, which we totally understand. We would love that to increase. However, I know that, obviously we want to at least maintain what we have presently. Chief Wright has been incredibly collaborative, and Sergeant Blythe, who's in charge of allocating the officers, has done a great job with our principals and our administrators.
And I know they feel that, and me talking to them, they feel the same way. And just to be clear, that is coming out of the police budget. That is not something that's coming out of your budget.
Correct.
Okay. My last question is really, it's an uncomfortable one, but it's one that I'm just gonna ask it because I'm curious, and it's really more maybe for Karen or any of the board members. Your budget vote was like 5-4. I mean, you thanked the Board of Ed earlier, but to me, it was not your typical 7, 8 to 1 with Marone opposed budget vote of the past.
Yeah, it
I'm just
wasn't.
curious in Wallingford to see that vote. I'm curious what because I don't follow that. I just don't have time to follow it. What were the pros and cons? What was the big debate? I'm just curious.
It was a matter, and Ms. Levac could jump in also, but it really wasn't a debate about the bottom line. I think there were some board members who wanted more, it was more of a philosophical budget in the sense that they wanted to support the fact that certain things that had been put forth in the strategic plan, like for example, the Dean of Students or other personnel positions, certain board members felt that they wanted to philosophically support that. And they stated that actually. And I think that it wasn't really where there was a great divide. I think it just happened to fall out that way. And then the rest of the process, moves smoothly. I mean, ever since then, when we talk about the budget, everybody's understanding where we were. But I don't know if Ms. Levac, if she wants to comment as board chair.
I guess I would like to comment on that. And it was a philosophical discussion, as Mr. Shortell, we sometimes have those things on the board. And it was a respectful discussion about where we thought the strategic plan items should go and what should be supported and what people felt we needed to keep moving the district forward and to ensure that our students had the very best education possible. And sometimes that's the beauty of having 9 different members with different philosophies. They bring different things to the table, and we have, a respectful discussion, and then we vote with what we feel is the information that we have. And it just so happened that we had more of a split vote on that. And this is not the first time that's happened on a budget before. So, but that's what I think. It's very healthy for us to have that democratic process.
If I may add, Ms. Levac, and as chair at the time, the thing was that the sustained services budget was not an issue. There was consensus, it was unanimous that the sustained services budget moving forward was not what was being debated. It was what went into the strategic plan portion of the budget.
That is correct. And again, we have, sometimes it's a large philosophical discussion. Do we need to have these items placed in there, or don't we? And why? And so there was a difference of opinion, and it was expressed in our vote.
That's great. I think every vote should be 5-4. I think that's great. It just struck me as something I hadn't seen in a while, so I just wanted to pick your brain about it. That's all. So, all right. Thank you. Appreciate all the work you're doing, especially during these trying times. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Dr. Menzo. I guess, first of all, since both of our gray hairs are coming through, that it's time for some Wonder Twin power. Can I get it? Can I get a little fist? Anyway.
There you go.
We've heard a lot tonight about the effect of the COVID situation on your budget. And I just, over the last few days, I've had some discussions with teachers in other districts. And I just want to get an idea in our district, what is the day in the life of a teacher? I just want to give you an example. In one district, a teacher told me that they only have to make themselves available to students 1 day a week, which I was a little shocked at. In another district, I was told that the teacher has to submit a lesson plan at the beginning of the week. It had to be with the students virtually from 8 to 10, and then from 1 to 3, 4 days a week. So what are we doing here in Wallingford?
Well, each level is being handled differently because developmentally it can't be a one size fits all model. So the middle school and the high school are more aligned. The middle school and the high school both follow their The high school has an A-B schedule, so the teachers see the students in their A-B schedule like they would Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Over the course of those 4 days, the teachers have to have a live lesson of up to 30 minutes with each class to make sure that the students are getting the instruction. They also have to have a video portion done of at least 20 minutes so that if the student can't take the class synchronistically because of the fact that they have other responsibilities with other siblings or such, they could get the instruction at a later time to complete it. Assignments have to be posted by 9 a.m. each day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We originally had made Wednesday across the district as an extra help day. At the high school, extra help day is on Friday. That's a day where the teachers have opportunities to meet with students. They also have opportunities at the high school level in particular. There's been a real outcry of the students to get together in clubs. So teachers are working together with students to give them access to clubs, and then also identifying time for teachers to meet in their professional learning groups on Fridays. And in addition to that, offering time to meet with their intervention teams, their SRBI teams, or their student resource teams in terms of students who might need additional supports and meet with families. But teachers across the district have to be available to students from predominantly between 9 and 3, but they're responsible for working between 8 and 3 each day. So that's high school. Middle school, similar, except they're a 3-day rotation. So they're an A, B, C. And so therefore, again, for each of their classes, they have to have at least one live session for each rotation. And again, if the student can't see the live session, there's a 20-minute, up to 20-minute recorded session. Some teachers at both levels are recording the session and incorporating it in the live session, which is a great educational tool using Edpuzzle and other technologies. At the middle school, we do have the teachers, based on parent feedback, take attendance because parents who might not be home during the day because they're first responders or frontline supporters in the COVID crisis need to and want to know that their students are logging in. So the teachers do post that in PowerSchool so parents can get alerts. This is not meant to do anything other than to provide that because we know that the state is not requiring attendance at this time. So that's middle school and high school. Similarly, middle school's help day is on Wednesdays. And again, teachers are meeting with students. Students are reaching out. Teachers are reaching out. Teachers are making a tremendous amount of phone calls, tremendous amount of emails, reaching out, as well as our social workers, our psychologists, our counselors, all of our services. At the elementary level, they have a schedule also, and it's where we've set it up where the principals have set it up so that there's an instruction day and then there's a reinforcement day. So each instruction day, the students are getting instruction from their teachers. The next day, the teacher's available to reinforce. And then Wednesdays, again, are a day for students to have additional support. We're also working with our other teachers, such in specialty areas like art, music, Spanish, at the elementary level, physical education, to provide movement breaks. It's a very comprehensive plan that has been worked on by the principals. They did that over their April vacation because the notification that we were extending to May 20th didn't come out until Thursday, April 9th. So the following week, we came back together because we knew that adjustments would have to be made to provide a program for students that was going to allow them to have access to curriculum that was Wallingford approved and also allow them to progress in their understanding. So that's the overarching view. I think our teachers are doing a remarkable job. I think that they certainly are aware of the fact that many of the students they serve, their families, are going through a lot of challenges, be it unemployment. We all know that there's well over 26 million people unemployed in the country. And I know Wallingford's unemployment has gone off drastically over the last 3 weeks. So we are all as educators very fortunate to be in our positions where we are still in an environment where we're able to be gainfully employed. And we are trying to work with flexibility for families and also for staff. when the Board of Education entered its agreement for with the teachers union on distance learning, one of the key things was we knew this was going to be new, and we knew it was going to be potentially learning that was going to take place over time for teachers. So we chose and we agreed that teachers wouldn't be evaluated during this period of time. So we tried to reduce some of the stress by removing the responsibility of the technical and the evaluations. We did that prior to the state announcing that a few weeks after we had signed, because we recognized that this was going to be new for our teachers. So that's just a high level view. It's all of our plans are on our website. I know that they've been accessed frequently by our parents, our teachers, our students, and other communities.
Okay, thank you for that. You know, a lot of my questions were already asked. I just had another area. I read in the newspaper how we decided to go to a pass-fail system for this school year, and I didn't see anything in the article. And you know, I know your guidance department, especially at the high schools, work very hard to try and get scholarships and grants and all of that stuff. What has been put in place for these students to put them on a level playing field with students from another state that did not do a pass-fail?
Well, basically, the pass-fail recommendation was made by the Commissioner of Education. And in several conference calls, he shared that the state of Connecticut was working with other states to get a determination prior to announcing that he was suggesting and highly recommending we move to a pass-fail. They were trying to get a handle on what other states were doing, just for the exact reason that you're asking. Were our students going to be at a disadvantage, especially our juniors? Our seniors have already applied to college. They have their career or life after high school decisions predominantly made. But how is this going to impact our high school students that are juniors, sophomores, freshmen? So the commissioner did share with us, and this was part of our decision-making process, that there was collaboration across other states. Universities throughout the state of Connecticut agreed also that this was the way for equity for us to move as a state. And in addition, looking at the NCAA requirements for students who want to be athletes, making sure that students weren't seen as not being eligible for college admission and college sports. So there was a lot of factors. Our administrators at both high schools really worked, all 6 of them, to really get all of the information they could from anyone they knew in our conference. I worked through our Superintendent's Association, obviously on the commissioner's conference calls. At the time, they were twice a week, getting information. It was probably one of the more difficult decisions. I know Mr. Corso and myself, Mr. Corso, principal of Lyman Hall, and myself, were somewhat of the holdouts on the pass-fail decision, because it was a challenge at first for me to understand, but then listening to our teachers, listening to our social workers, listening to our counselors, listening to our administrators, the equity piece is so challenging. So that was how we came about, but we believe, based on the information we've received from the state and from other sources, that our students will not be in jeopardy of being treated any differently than any other student in the state of Connecticut or throughout the country.
Well, I find that very difficult to believe, but I take your representation on that, because at this point, of our 169 different towns in this state, they haven't all adopted that also. So I know some towns are holdouts right here, and I highly doubt that every school district in the whole country is going to do that. So you know, I did get a call. Yep.
Yes, some districts have not commented at all. So that's the way that they're going, is that they're leaving it as it is right now. And then, and this is not just in Connecticut, but in some of the research nationally, that they're going along with the fact that when it comes to the time of grading, kind of like what UConn decided, that they could go pass-fail at the end. And again, that was discussed, but was not the recommendation we move forward with.
Yeah, I understand. I did get a call from somebody who was concerned about that, and you know, because this all started after we were halfway through the school year, And, you know, midterms have been done and you could have booked those. So,
The
you
other
know.
thing I should just mention is that because the third quarter at the high school level was complete. So those are true scores. So we had the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. The fourth quarter, because of going to pass fail, this principals recommended that there was a difference in the weighting of the fourth quarter, so that it didn't overinflate or underinflate or deflate a student's overall score for that particular class. So that was another discerning factor that was really important for our administrators to really process and think through.
Okay, thank you. And as I said, my questions were answered. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the time.
Certainly. I don't see any other counselors with questions for the Board of Ed. And are there any members of the public? We'll give it a minute. And did counselors have questions for the cafeteria budget, or were those asked during this portion? All right. Dr. Menzo, it looks like you are done for tonight.
Great.
If you could take away your screen from our presentation.
Stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sustaining the grilling so well.
No, thank you.
Yep, we'll be seeing you. All right, moving along the agenda. Mr. Bose, you are up, and I'm going to ask you, do you mind if I call for questions on the three remaining topics together?
It's whichever you folks like to do. I'm here. It's whatever you guys like. It's up to you
All right.
folks.
So, counselors, the last three items on the agenda are finance. Well, in our budget book, finance and debt service are right next to each other on pages 20 and 22. And then capital appropriation reserves on page 89. So I would just say that if you have questions for any of those three departments, now is the time to ask. And
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Why don't we take page 89, the appropriations and forts? I believe I sent something out to you folks based upon some questions that I received. So that's probably the easiest one to knock off. If it's up to you folks. It doesn't matter to you folks.
Well, why don't you go ahead if you want to talk about the answers that you've advanced to us, that would be helpful.
Well, actually, as I'm looking for it, I think it's in my office, and I'm not in my office. Son of a gun. Okay, I might have to run to my office for that. Please pardon me. There's like 7 million sheets of paper here. But anyway, let's get into that, the appropriations in force a little bit. Page 89. Basically, what happens is there are certain items in there. And I believe that the question was, can you give us a little description of maybe why the items are here, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, I updated the balances through, I believe, last week or the week before. Those balances will change again before they come to you for adoption. That's because the funds obviously are still being spent. So this basically traces the calendar of the budget process, starting when the mayor's budget is due to you folks, April 1. So the original column in the request is basically what we were, those balances at that time. I think I sent an updated one, which shows some reduction since then, as some of those funds were spent. And an explanation of a little bit of some of those. So if it's all right with you, why don't I just open that up to questions by the council members?
That is just fine. Up first is Councilor Shortell.
Mr. Chairman, is this just for appropriations in force or is this for everything? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm following.
I think Mr. Bose was going to attack capital appropriation reserve to attack the questions that were asked in advance, but I would encourage you to ask questions on all three lines at this point. Is that okay, Jim?
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Jim, I did read your memo. I have no questions on appropriations in force because you answered them in that memo that you sent. So I want to thank you. Thank you for that. You answered all my questions. So my questions are really around two things: the finance line and the contingency account, which I had previously talked to Chairman Cervoni, because contingency is not something that we have a hearing. It's not in our agenda for any kind of hearing. And Chairman Cervoni said that tonight would be appropriate to also ask about that. So that's where my questions are. They're pretty easy questions. On finance, I guess I'm trying to understand with the overall finance budget. When I look back over the history, there's a trend where there's several $100,000 that seems to always be left in that account at the end of the year unspent. So I went back, I looked at the last 5 years of budgets and back to 2015. And so 247,000 in 2015, 112,000 in 2016, 248,000 in 2017, 163,000 in 2018, 238,000 in 2019. We can talk about this year seems to be trending to be a little less, but I don't know if you have to tell me if how to extrapolate that. I mean, I can average it out over 12 months, but I don't know if it's seasonal or not. And then just because I was curious, I mean, I went back, and you'll make fun of me probably. I went back 20 years because I just wanted to see. So I was looking at in the year 2000, it was 113,000, and then 2004 it was 263,000, in 2005 it was 343,000. I think it's right around when you, I think, were hired. I'm not saying there's a correlation. That's just trivia. So anyway, that was just me reading off numbers. So I went for the last 20 years because I don't know why. I had nothing better to do. I picked up 16 of the last 20 years, and the average in that budget line that's left over is $225,835. So I guess my question is, educate me. I'm not criticizing obviously, look, it's a $2 million budget when you factor in everything. It's more than that, I think. I get it. You're not going to get it down to a penny, but I'm just trying to understand, is there something, or what am I missing about how this department works? Like, why is that money consistently left over? Because I'm just wondering if we reduced it by 100,000, which would be less than half of the average, what impact would that even have? So I guess that's my question on finance.
That's an excellent question, Chris. I was trying to cut you off in the middle because I think I would have saved you some breath. But anyway, each year, and frankly, this correlates a little bit to the appropriations in force, the page 89. You will see in a controller's budget that we budget anywhere between usually $100,000 to $200,000 annually for revaluation. And then we come to the council at year end and we ask for those funds to be appropriated or carried forward, if you will, as an appropriation in force. So they're not spent that year. They're spent in a prior year out of the reservation of the fund balance, which we call assigned fund balance. So, for example, I believe you mentioned last year was 238,000 or something to that effect. Last year, we had $200,000 budgeted for revaluation. That was then moved with the council approval to the carry forward, AKA the appropriations in force. So, well, in essence, really only $38,000 was not spent per se. So that's what really, you have to look at, see what revaluation, the effect of revaluation. You are correct that the information that you're seeing is accurate, and it's just the way that that works. The budget doesn't get charged in the budget year when the funds are approved. It gets, it gets charged when the funds are actually spent, which is usually in a future year.
Yep, okay. That makes sense. So you're saving up money for the every 5 years that we do revaluation.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes sense. My question then on contingency, which is a little, I mean, it's not quite the same, that there are years where contingency is drained down to almost nothing. In 2004, it was $7,000 was left. 2008, 27,000. 2018, 3,000. But then there's many other years where we carry a pretty big balance in contingency. Can you talk about the philosophy? And I get what contingency. I understand its purpose is just what it's named, as a sort of I guess a safety net. Is there a formula you use? And
No,
and I guess I would also, or how do you come up with a number? And what are some examples of like some of the years I just mentioned where we did drain it down? Like what happened those years?
Sure, great question. I've used an average from the last several years, the last 3 years or so, give or take. And then I tried to adjust that for what might be lying in the weeds on us. And you are correct. Last year, fiscal year, well, the last audited fiscal year 19, I think we drained it pretty much close to full completion. The year before that, about the same. And then we had a couple of years where things were a little bit lighter. First and foremost, a lot of that has to do with how we do in the winter time, as far as some of the snow and ice removal costs, snow and ice control costs, if you will. So this year, you're probably seeing a little bit better of a balance remaining there as we're speaking, because we have, fortunately, we've had a decent winter, so therefore we haven't had to move money out of contingency with the council action, obviously, to public works for snow and ice, and all other departments as well who have to deal with snow and ice removal. So when I do up a little bit of an average, I have to be a little bit cognizant of a large factor this year. That number probably, I believe in the general contingency, I budgeted $350,000 for the upcoming fiscal year, the budget that's in front of you. That would have been about maybe about 310, 300, but we're going to have some costs that were coming to light. Maybe not fully, but as we are moving through the budget process to get the mayor's budget to you folks by April 1, the major one being unemployment. We were starting to get some executive orders and some other information with regards to people who had been laid off, part-timers, a lot of seasonal folks who qualify for unemployment. And right now, Jimmy Hutt has got he'll probably expand upon this when you guys speak to him. I believe it's next week or the week after, because I prepped him for that question as well. But he's looking at about $30,000 to $35,000 that he knows of today, that unemployment's going to exceed his line item for that in the new fiscal year, in the budget that you folks are looking at. So I was down in the low 300s. I don't remember exactly I think it was like 305, Chris, I was down to this year in council members. And then just adding a couple things in there, really, mostly because of the COVID-19 issue, obviously, got me up to about $350,000. Now, something also happened last week, which we weren't expecting. Obviously, the primary here in the state of Connecticut was moved from April to June originally, and then obviously we would have paid for all those costs in the current year budget, year ending 6/30/2020. Now, however, the news, everybody knows, the primary was moved to September. And Chet and Mr. Avery, Bob Avery and Chet Miller did not budget for a primary next fiscal year. Now, that really isn't part of the 350, but having that 350 there a little higher than what I was originally going to propose makes me feel a little bit better about that, because according to Chet, I spoke with Chet a couple of days ago, he's going to need somewhere in the area of about $15,000 to run the primary. I don't know, maybe Barbara Thompson has more of a number on that, but anyway, it's going to happen in the new fiscal year, and it's not budgeted. So with that, a couple of factors, and I'm sure other things are going to come down the pike. That I felt leaving it around the 350 mark was something I was much more confident with.
Understood. I guess let me just ask you. So, what if that were the case? Why wouldn't? Or is it too late for? This is just a procedural question. Like, why wouldn't Chet just amend his budget? Like, send us a letter? Is it because it's past April 1st? The budget can't be, or I guess that's. So what you're saying is stuff that comes in after April 1st, we have to put in contingency. I'm just trying to follow that, because if it's Chet's expense, why would it be budgeted in contingency?
No, actually, if it comes in after April 1st, the council can add to the budgets if the council chooses any line item that you wish.
Yeah.
But obviously, I know that you folks are making some attempts to reduce the mill rate projected, but so adding more, and plus number two, we don't know the amount of that primary and or Jim Hutt's issue with unemployment to really throw into their budget. So having it in contingency, I think, is kind of like a little safety net.
Okay. Okay. Last question, and this kind of goes back a little bit to my earlier question on the appropriations in force. What you answered, how you in finance, that extra money is really going to appropriations in force. It's just a general question about that. Are there? I know that in the budget book, on the page for appropriations in force, there's a definition of what should go in it, but that's not a legal definition, because that's not like cap and non, where cap and non is governed by an ordinance, which legally defines how that money can be spent. Appropriations in force, there's a definition that's, if you read it, it's kind of similar to cap and non, but that's not binding, right? Or I guess tell me from an accounting perspective, are there limits to what I could put in appropriations in force, or anyone could put, or no? I mean, you have, like you talked about in your memo, you have a printer that you had problems with, and you're gonna, so that dollar amount carries forward. Like, are there any limits? Like, could you put someone's salary in there, or not? There's a scenario in my head that will explain why I'm asking that, but I guess I'm just trying to understand any guidelines around appropriations in force that you guys use.
Sure. You're correct. There's no, the cap and non-recurring obviously has several ordinances that were passed over the years, which established, how that fund is managed and used. But that is not the case with appropriations in force. Appropriations in force I discuss those with the department heads each year as we're in the budget season, usually in March, prior to the mayor's budget being owed to you guys. And we stick with the items that we put in the capital section of each of the departmental budgets. As you can see, we don't carry forward operating expenses for salaries or things of that nature. However, I think we did that once, and it was actually because of something that actually I believe Councilmember Fishbein mentioned at one of the meetings last week, was the plan of development, the plan of community development. And when the Planning and Zoning Office put in over 2 years, they funded that $35,000 for year one, and then we did a year two of that for year two. And I remember that, so I got to make sure I say it's not 100% of the time, but that was a deliberate 2-year budgeting, if you will, of that costs. And when Councilman Craig said that last week, that kind of triggered my memory. So what I'm going to say, other than that one that I can remember, that they're for capital items or to spend monies at a later date after accumulating them to avoid a spike up in the budget.
Exactly. That's exactly yeah, that's what I'm getting at,
And
to
it can't-
avoid a spike
But-
in the
Yeah, but
budget.
also,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but also, yeah, the mayor just wrote me a note to remind me, he's correct. We can't use them for any, for example, take revaluation. I can't go out and spend that for anything else, out of my budget. I have to spend that for revaluation, only for the intention that it was originally appropriated for during the budget process and then carried forward by the council and the mayor in the budget process in the following year.
Okay. Okay, those are, I appreciate the answers. I appreciate all the memo. I know we've all hit you with a lot of questions too, so thanks for all the information, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. No problem. You're very welcome.
Thank you. Councilor Fishbein, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Jim. Jim, I've reviewed the answers that you've given us, and thank you for those. But I just wanted to take off on what Councilor Shortell and you were exchanging about appropriations in force and the cap and non-recurring. Why don't the projects that are in cap and non-recurring that aren't started, that are just sitting there, why aren't they required to be part of appropriations in force?
Excellent question, Craig. It's a different bookkeeping fund. The reason why these items, as we're calling them on page 89, the appropriations in force, have to be brought forward legally is because they're part of the general fund. And the general fund, by generally accepted accounting principles for local governments, as well as by law, state statute actually, general funds lapse at the end of the year and you start fresh every year. Capital non-recurring and also what you might see in other capital project funds, as well as special revenue funds, they don't lapse at year end. They lapse when the purpose is complete and or those funds are closed out. That's basically the fundamental difference between the two.
Okay, that's a good answer. Is the cap and non-recurring budget part of the audit?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's included. All of our funds are included in the audit. Yes.
Okay, those are the questions that I had. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Bose. How are you?
Good evening. How are you? I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to go over these things, but we will hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Who would have known this would happen? So I'll start off with the page 89. I just got a question about how these items how they factor into the mill rate. So is it when they're appropriated? Are we taxed on these each year? Or how does that work?
Actually, what you're doing by passing the items on page 89, after I adjust them, downwards as we spend more money, probably between today and when your budget adoption is due. Those are sort of already paid for, if you want to use that expression. They've already been accounted for in the mill rate in a past fiscal year, and we're basically asking the council to authorize those, to move those to spend in another fiscal year because, like I had just answered with the Councilman Fishbein, is that these they are part of the general fund and they lapse.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. And my other questions, I have questions on a few specific items there. It looks like there are a few items that I would think would be more money than is left here. I'm not sure how they would have like a partial payment. So for example, a dump truck for public works, and it says that there's $13,314. I mean, I assume the dump truck is much more expensive than that. So where does that number come from?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. It is a lot more expensive. What happens is as the various department heads and I discuss these matters, usually, like I said, in the month of March each year, have to ask them if is there anything left to complete that purchase? Is there some painting? Is there something that's going to be added to the vehicle, especially the heavy duty vehicles like that, and things of that nature? It could even be something as simple as like mud flaps and stuff like that, because next year, many cases, there is no budget in the upcoming budget for such expenditure. So if we let them lapse and close out, then we have to come back before the council in the new fiscal year to transfer monies out of contingency to complete that, to basically complete the purchase. Many of those items that you're seeing with regards to some of those larger ticket items that we only have a seemingly small balance, those are normally ones that between today and either when you folks meet to adopt the budget later this month or by June 30th, that's usually complete. That's usually complete. But we have to at least present them to you folks in the mayor's budget by April 1st, because that's where we are in the timeline of the fiscal year and in the budget process. So if I did not add those items, and it's after discussion, by the way, with, in this case, Mr. Baltramitis, but if we did not add these in there and they did not, for some strange reason, let's say, complete the building of a truck or something like that, then we'd have to come back and get some funds from you folks in the new fiscal year, which is something that we tried to avoid.
Okay, perfect. And my only other question on this page was under economic development, the consulting engineer, that's a one-time, that's like an outsourced thing, a one-time expense, or why is that on this page?
That was originally a couple years ago. The economic development had a specific parcel of property that they were working to get some type of plan in place with regards to utilities and development, et cetera, potentially. I don't remember what the parcel is now off the top of my head, but I spoke to Tim Ryan in March, our economic development a recruiter, of course, and this was originally going to be outsourced. And then we were originally to do this in-house. And then through the engineering office, when Rob Baltramitis was our town engineer, in conjunction maybe with our three utilities, for access and for various parcels of property that are within our one or two of our industrial zones, industrial parks. For some reason, that did not happen. I don't know if a potential buyer, I think their financing went away. But if you don't mind, because my memory is just, and I've got all these notes now, but I don't have them with me. If you don't mind just remembering that when you speak to economic development, I'm sure Tim Ryan will be glad to fill you in on that as well.
Sure, yeah, I'll make note of that and ask him then. And then, just making that. So moving on to finance. So obviously, I've been asking pretty much every department the same two questions. Did you see any savings in your department because of the pandemic or any additional costs? And then also my second question is, if we were to ask you to try to find 1% to save beyond what the mayor's proposed budget is, would that be a hardship for you?
No, it would not be a hardship. But just to get the last question out of the way first. Some of the issues in this year's budget, I reduced another position down from 28 to 27. We had an opening. When I have an opening, I'm sorry to bore you at this late hour with this, folks. If you just bear with me. I have the 4 divisions of accounting, purchasing, a revenue and tax collection, and our assessment office. When we have an opening, I work with the division head, obviously our tax collector, our assessor, our deputy controller. Many of you know these folks, and of course Sal Amadeo, our purchasing agent. Say, let's just see, where this shakes out. Let's see if this can be reprogrammed somehow. We did have a position open in the accounting department due to a retirement. In the current year budget that ends June 30th, 2020, I budgeted for half a year only because I just wanted to see what was going to happen. And I figure by the time a test is given and interviews are conducted, et cetera, it could probably live 6 months anyway. And as my deputy controller and I reviewed that position, reassigned some work to other folks, we came to the decision in putting the 2021 budget that's before you now that we don't need that position, which brought us from 28, an employee count of 28 down to 27 in that budget there. So I've always done that, Counselor Tata, since I've been here in '04. When I got here, I had 35 employees among the 4 divisions. I'm down to 27. Every single one of them has been through attrition, through retirement, through combining a couple jobs into one. All of them, after discussion with the labor unions involved, and have not incurred one dime of labor cost or legal cost with regards to any of those issues. So I've been fortunate. I've been, I speak to the union folks frequently about these matters, and I've gotten great cooperation because I just want the ability to control our own workflows, our own workforce, our own workflows and processes. So right now, I think that 27 number is pretty darn good. But frankly, if the council came to me and said, "Hey, Jim, can you get us 10 grand? Can you get me 15?" The answer is yes. I would find somewhere and make that presentation. I would go to war with what you guys give me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so upfront about that. Yeah, and then I guess the only other thing is, I wouldn't assume so, but did your department see any savings due to the pandemic or any costs associated with it?
No, we have not seen any savings from it, and I don't think we're going to be incurring any costs either, other than possibly some few bucks in overtime in a couple of the divisions, because some folks have taken advantage of some of the emergency family leave acts that came down from the federal government to take some time here and there. But even that, it hasn't been a lot. It hasn't been a lot at all. But our 4 divisions are very busy. Purchasing is assisting every chance they can with police and fire to make emergency purchase, or I should say, first responding type of purchases. And as you know, we're still opening bids maybe 3 days a week, sometimes 4. So that process is moving quite well. Our revenue collection office, the tax office, I mean, the crew down there, the ladies down there, and I say ladies because they're all female, they've been fantastic. We had some great help from Public Works to put up a sort of like a plexiglass barrier, to help stop the sprawl of the flow and the spread of the COVID-19. Same thing upstairs in the accounting office. We had separated people, physically throughout the building, and we did the same thing in assessors. So the assessors and the tax collector are also helping me, as well as the business manager with electric and water and sewer with regards to the deferment program that we're having now. So a lot of this stuff has been caused by the COVID, but it's our job, and I'll tell you, I'm just ecstatic with my 27 and 27 folks. I'm just they've been great. I mean, I know we're not first responders, we're not doctors, we're not nurses. We know that, but we're here and we're doing what we have to do to help those folks out as best we can.
Sure. Yeah, we appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from counselors? Any questions from members of the public? Counselor Shortell.
I'm good. Sorry. I'm good. Thank you.
Itchy trigger finger. All right. There being no takers and no further business on the agenda, I am going to call this meeting to a close. I'll see you all Thursday night.
Thank you very much, all 9 of you. Appreciate your time.
Good night.
Good
Have a good
night.
night.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
This conference is no
Good night,
longer
everybody.
being recorded.